What does voting look like in the 2020 election amid a pandemic? Polling stations are potential hotspots. They inherently pose the risk of mass social gathering, plus sharing confined voting booths and tools could lead to contaminated surfaces. Voting by mail could be a solution to these problems. Voting by mail is slightly different state to state. Typically, this type of voting is reserved for absentee ballots. These are given out on an individual basis when you request one from your local election officials. Then, once election day is closer, you'd receive a ballot in the mail, fill it out at home, and mail it back to your local officials to be counted. But what does this look like on a national scale when mail-in ballots would likely be in high demand?
The logistics of actually doing this in November is very problematic because the number of people voting in a primary is just a fraction of the number of people who vote in the general election. And what we've seen in a number of states that have that allow absentee ballot requests is that the requests for absentee ballots are skyrocketing. And states can't always fulfill all the requests on time. Lots of states are making it easier to vote by mail. How easy it's going to be, it's going to depend on the states. The requests are going to come. People are going to want absentee ballots. The only question is if there's going to be enough funding to do it the right way and enough competence and staffing to be able to do it, and machinery. As soon as you are allowed to, in your jurisdiction, to request an absentee ballot, if you want to vote that way, you should request it. We need to flatten the absentee ballot request curve, because there's really a danger that if you wait till the last minute, you may not get your ballot in time, and your ballot has to be returned by a deadline.
Some states had to transition from in-person to mail-in primaries. While not a perfect test case for the general election, they may offer some guidance. Ohio was one of a few states that had to make this quick shift.
We found out literally about 12 hours before we were supposed to open our polling locations on Tuesday, March 17th, that we were not going to be having an in-person primary. And so very quickly, we had to kind of unravel and undo everything that we had been setting up. It was a multi-step process that had to take place in a actually a very short period of time. And so through no fault of the post office or really anyone involved, it was just a matter of when you send that many pieces of mail back and forth multiple times through the Postal Service, that takes time. So it's not just a matter of simply opening up that ballot and sending it through a scanner. We have to verify some information to make sure that the ballot we received was from the voter who voted it. The biggest benefit, most obviously, was we were very early on in the pandemic and we just weren't sure exactly what the disease was, what it looked like, how it was transmitted. There were so many open-ended questions. The biggest benefit was just not having people vote in person on March 17th.
Meanwhile, President Trump has expressed hesitation about mail-in voting, claiming that it presents voter fraud risks.
If people mail in ballots, there's a lot of illegality. They send in ballots that they harvest ballots. You know all about harvesting, and they do lots of bad things.
In reality, mail-in voter fraud is extremely rare.
When election fraud does happen, it more often happens with absentee ballots than other kinds of fraud. Still, the absolute number of cases of absentee ballot fraud are low, and the cases that are actually aimed at trying to throw an election are very, very rare. The president has been making unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud for years.
Every time voter fraud occurs, it cancels out the vote of a lawful citizen and undermines democracy. Can't let that happen.
So now the president has turned to talking about mail-in ballot fraud.
I think that mail-in voting is a terrible thing.
Why is that? I think he fears that if there's a large turnout, it's going to hurt him. He's trying to put in place a way to make it harder for people to vote by mail or to cast a doubt on the legitimacy of the election.
Democrats have continued to push for a cautious approach to the 2020 election.
Vote by mail is a health issue, just as food is a health issue. We cannot have people going to places that are predictably dangerous to their health.
As the coronavirus pandemic continues to evolve, while November creeps closer, it remains possible that the virus could have a massive logistical impact on Election Day.
There is going to be a greater reliance on mail. I don't think we're going to mandate mail voting, all mail voting in Ohio, but certainly I think more and more people are going to avail themselves to that option. And so having kind of an experiment in how that process works and what it looks like for boards of elections is just going to enable us to do it better in the future and serve our voters better in the future.